Picture this. You're 8 months pregnant, screaming in labor, racing to the hospital when your car breaks down on a narrow bridge. The ambulance arrives ready to save your baby's life. But there's one problem. Your billionaire husband refuses to let them move his precious Bentley out of the way. Do you know what this car costs? Do you know who I am? Those were the words that went viral when paramedic Marcus Bradley started recording. 37 million people watched Elena Blackwell's husband choose his car over his unborn child's life. But what happened next shocked the world even more. This isn't just another rich person scandal. This is the story of a woman who discovered her marriage was built on lies, control, and a man who saw her as property rather than a person. What started as a medical emergency became a courtroom drama that exposed the dark reality of financial abuse and inspired millions of women to reclaim their voices. You won't believe what Elena uncovered about that night. The evidence that proved her husband didn't just block the ambulance. He planned the entire crisis. The moment she realized 5 years of her life had been a carefully constructed prison, and the incredible transformation that turned a silenced wife into a voice for millions. "Stop the car! Stop the car!" Elena's scream pierced through the Mercedes' leather interior. The contraction gripped her like a vice, stealing her breath and making her double over in the passenger seat. 8 months pregnant, she wasn't supposed to be feeling this yet. The baby wasn't due for another 4 weeks. "Elena, breathe, just breathe." Jonathan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he pressed harder on the accelerator. "We're almost there." Another wave of pain crashed over her, stronger than the last. She clutched her swollen belly and felt something wet between her legs. "Jonathan, something's wrong. The baby's coming now." The Bentley's engine suddenly sputtered. Once, twice, then died completely. "No, no, no!" Jonathan slammed his palm against the steering wheel. They were on the narrow Riverside Bridge, barely wide enough for 2 cars. The city skyline glittered ahead of them, the hospital just 5 minutes away. "Not now!" Elena felt another contraction building. This one was different, urgent, demanding. "Call 911. Call them now." Jonathan fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed. "Yes, this is Jonathan Blackwell. My wife is in labor, and our car broke down on Riverside Bridge. We need an ambulance immediately." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sir, we're sending a unit now. Please stay on the line." Elena gripped the door handle as pain shot through her core. Something was definitely wrong. The contractions were too close together, too intense. She'd read every pregnancy book, attended every class. This wasn't normal. Within 3 minutes, she heard the wail of sirens. The ambulance appeared behind them, red and blue lights flashing against the evening sky. But there was a problem. The bridge was too narrow. The Bentley was blocking the only lane forward. "Sir, you need to move your vehicle," came a voice through a megaphone. Jonathan stepped out of the car, his expensive suit wrinkled from the stress. "I can't move it. The engine's dead." Elena watched through the rear window as a paramedic approached Jonathan. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that reminded her of her father. His name tag read M. Bradley. "Sir, we need to get to your wife. Can you push the car to the side?" "Push it?" Jonathan's voice rose an octave. "Do you know what this car costs? Do you know who I am?" Elena's heart sank. Even now, even with their baby's life at stake, Jonathan was thinking about his precious car. She tried to open her door, but another contraction hit her like a freight train. Marcus Bradley pulled out his phone and started recording. Elena could hear him speaking into the camera. "This is paramedic Marcus Bradley. We have a woman in active labor, but the vehicle owner is refusing to allow us to move his car to reach the patient." "I didn't say you couldn't move it," Jonathan snapped. "I said you couldn't push it. I'm calling my mechanic." "Sir, your wife is having a baby. We don't have time for a mechanic." Elena heard Jonathan's phone ring. He answered it immediately. "Rodriguez? Thank God. I need you to get to Riverside Bridge right now. My Bentley died, and these people want to damage it." "Sir, please," Marcus said. "We have protocol for medical emergencies." "Then follow your protocol and find another way around." Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. She banged on the window. "Jonathan, just let them move the car." But Jonathan had turned away, still talking to his mechanic. "No, absolutely not. I don't care if it takes an hour. That car cost more than most people make in a year." Marcus looked directly into his phone camera. The patient's husband has refused to allow emergency services to move his vehicle. We're going to have to reverse and take the long way around the river. This will add approximately 8 to 10 minutes to our response time. Elena watched in horror as the ambulance began backing up. 8 to 10 minutes. With contractions this close together, every minute mattered. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands. 3 times she tried to unlock it. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. Finally, she managed to call Jonathan. What? His voice was sharp through the speaker. Please, she whispered. Please just let them move the car. Elena, you don't understand. This is a limited edition Bentley Continental. There are only 50 of these in the world. There's only one of our baby in the world. The line went quiet. For a moment, Elena thought she'd gotten through to him. Then she heard him talking to someone else. Rodriguez said he'll be here in 15 minutes. Can you wait 15 minutes? Elena hung up. She couldn't breathe. Not from the contractions, but from the realization of what was happening. Her husband, the man who claimed to love her more than life itself, was choosing his car over their child. The ambulance had disappeared around the bend. She was alone with the man she thought she knew. Jonathan got back in the car, his face flushed with irritation. I don't know why they couldn't just go around in the first place. These city workers have no respect for private property. Elena stared at him, really looked at him. The perfectly styled hair that cost more than her grocery budget. The watch that could pay for a year of college tuition. The suit that was tailored to hide the softness around his middle that came from too many business dinners. Do you hear yourself? She asked quietly. What do you mean? I could lose our baby because you won't let them move your car. That's not fair, Elena. You know how much this car means to me. My father gave it to me when Blackwell Industries went public. It's not just a car, it's a symbol. Another contraction hit her, and this time she screamed. Really screamed. The sound echoed off the bridge's steel girders. Jonathan reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't touch me. Elena, you're being dramatic. The ambulance will come around. Everything will be fine. But everything wasn't fine. Elena could feel something shifting inside her, something urgent and unstoppable. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. In the distance, she could see the ambulance racing along the river road, its lights flashing like a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. But it looked so far away, too far away. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the pain. When she opened them again, she saw Jonathan checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing down his hair. Even now, even with their baby's life hanging in the balance, he was worried about how he looked. Elena felt something break inside her chest. Not her water, not physically, something deeper. Something that had taken her 5 years of marriage to build and 30 seconds to destroy. Trust. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. The ambulance was coming back around the long way, just as Marcus had said. But those lost minutes felt like hours. As the red and blue lights finally reached them again, Elena made a decision. When this was over, when their baby was safe, she was going to remember this moment. This exact moment when she learned who her husband really was, and she was never going to forget. Sir, we have a woman in active labor. Please move your vehicle. Marcus Bradley kept his phone camera rolling. Elena could hear everything through the ambulance walls as the paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher. Her husband's voice carried clearly across the bridge, sharp with entitlement and irritation. I told you already. I'm not moving anything until my mechanic gets here. The second paramedic, a young woman with gentle hands, checked Elena's vitals. How far apart are your contractions, honey? 2 minutes, Elena gasped. Maybe less. The woman's eyes widened slightly. Elena had attended enough childbirth classes to know that look. It wasn't good. Outside, Marcus continued his recording. Elena could hear every word. Sir, your wife is in active labor at 8 months pregnant. This is a premature birth situation. Every minute matters. Don't lecture me about my wife, Jonathan snapped. I'm the one who's been taking care of her for 5 years. I think I know what she needs better than some city employee. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. Taking care of her? Jonathan hadn't even remembered her last doctor's appointment. She'd gone alone, just like she'd gone to most of them. We're going to have to take the long way, Marcus said into his camera. Patient is experiencing contractions every 2 minutes. This delay could be life-threatening for both mother and baby. The ambulance started moving, and Elena felt every bump and turn as they navigated back around the river. The bridge route would have taken 3 minutes. This detour would take at least 12. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The female paramedic squeezed Elena's hand. "Elena. Elena Martinez." She paused. "Blackwell, Elena Blackwell." "I'm Amy. We're going to take good care of you, Elena. Try to breathe through the contractions. Don't push yet." But Elena's body wasn't listening to instructions. The urge to push was overwhelming. "Something's wrong. This isn't how it's supposed to happen." Amy checked her phone. "We're calling ahead to Dr. Hayes. She's the best OB in the city. She'll be waiting for us." Through the ambulance windows, Elena could see the city lights blurring past. Somewhere behind them, Jonathan was still standing beside his precious Bentley, waiting for his mechanic. She wondered if he was even thinking about her and the baby, or if he was just worried about getting the car started. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan. "Everything okay? Rodriguez says 20 minutes for the engine." 20 minutes. He was thinking about 20 more minutes while she was racing to the hospital to save their baby's life. Elena didn't respond. She couldn't. Another contraction was building, stronger than any before. Amy was talking into her radio. "Patient is Elena Blackwell, 32 years old, 8 months pregnant. Active labor, contractions every 90 seconds. We're approximately 8 minutes out." 8 minutes that should have been 3. Amy noticed Elena crying. "Hey, it's going to be okay. We see this all the time. Premature babies are fighters." "It's not the baby," Elena whispered. "Well, not just the baby." Amy's expression softened. She'd probably seen it all in her years as a paramedic. "Honey, stress isn't good for either of you right now. Try to focus on breathing." But how could she not be stressed? Her husband had just showed her exactly where she ranked in his priorities. Below a car, below his image, below his convenience. The ambulance pulled up to Mercy General Hospital, and Elena was rushed through automatic doors into controlled chaos. Dr. Patricia Hayes was waiting, just as Amy had promised. She was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and no-nonsense eyes. "Elena, I'm Dr. Hayes. We're going to take good care of you and your baby. How are you feeling?" "Scared," Elena admitted. "That's normal. Let's get you comfortable and see what's happening." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of medical terminology and urgent consultations. The baby wasn't in distress, but Elena was dilating faster than normal for a first pregnancy. Dr. Hayes explained that sometimes stress could accelerate labor. "The good news is your baby's heartbeat is strong," Dr. Hayes said, "but we need to slow things down if we can. I'm going to give you something to help with that." Elena felt the medication take effect, and the urgent pressure eased slightly. She could breathe again. That's when Jonathan arrived. He burst through the hospital room door like he owned the place, his hair perfectly styled and his suit immaculate. "Elena, are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Before she could answer, he was already turning to Dr. Hayes. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge. Your ambulance crew was completely unprofessional. They tried to damage my car and then had the audacity to argue with me about it." Elena stared at him. "Are you serious right now?" "What do you mean?" "Our baby almost died because you wouldn't move your car." "That's not what happened, Elena. You're emotional right now. The stress is making you irrational." Dr. Hayes cleared her throat. "Mr. Blackwell, your wife has been through a traumatic experience. I'd suggest focusing on her needs right now." "I am focusing on her needs. That's why I'm here instead of dealing with my car situation." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Instead of dealing with his car situation, like being with his wife and unborn child during a medical emergency was an inconvenience. "The baby's fine," she said quietly, "in case you were wondering." "Of course I was wondering. Why would you even say that?" "Because you haven't asked, not once since you walked in here." Jonathan's face flushed. "I've been dealing with a crisis situation, Elena. Someone has to handle these things. Someone has to handle our baby almost being born in an ambulance because we couldn't get to the hospital. That's not my fault. If the ambulance crew had been more reasonable, if you had been more reasonable, we wouldn't have needed the ambulance crew to be anything." Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "I think Elena needs to rest now. This much stress isn't good for her or the baby." Jonathan nodded curtly. Fine, but I want to speak to your administrator about your ambulance protocols. What happened tonight was completely unacceptable. After he left, Elena lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Dr. Hayes sat down beside her. Do you want to talk about what happened out there? Elena turned to look at the older woman. There was something in her eyes that said she'd seen this before. My husband blocked an ambulance because he didn't want anyone to move his car. I see. I almost lost our baby because he was worried about scratches on his paint. Dr. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Elena, I've been delivering babies for 27 years. I've seen a lot of different kinds of stress during labor, but I've never had to treat someone whose husband prioritized a vehicle over their life. The words hung in the air between them. I'm not crazy, Elena said softly. He really put his car before our baby. No, Dr. Hayes replied. You're not crazy at all. For the first time since the contractions started, Elena felt like someone was seeing the situation clearly. Someone was acknowledging the insanity of what had just happened. Outside her room, she could hear Jonathan's voice at the nurse's station, demanding to speak to someone about the incompetent ambulance crew and threatening to sue the city. Elena closed her eyes and tried to process what had just happened to her life. In the span of 2 hours, she'd gone from being a woman married to a successful businessman to being a woman married to someone who would let her die rather than risk damaging his property. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. She'd been living with a stranger for 5 years. She just hadn't known it until tonight. Elena, honey, you need to see this. Sarah burst into the hospital room, her face flushed from running. It was 3 a.m. Elena had finally managed to doze off after the doctors confirmed the baby was stable. Jonathan had gone home hours ago to deal with the car situation and hadn't returned. Sarah Coleman had been Elena's best friend since college. She was also a nurse at Children's Hospital across town, which meant she understood medical emergencies in a way that Jonathan clearly didn't. Sarah, what are you doing here? How did you even know? Everyone knows. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Elena, you need to see this before anyone else shows it to you. The video was grainy but clear enough. Elena watched herself being loaded into the ambulance while her husband stood beside his Bentley, gesturing angrily at the paramedic who was recording. Do you know who I am? Jonathan's voice was unmistakable. I'm Jonathan Blackwell. I own Blackwell Industries. Sir, your wife is having a baby, and I'm handling the situation. You people need to learn some respect for private property. Elena watched Marcus Bradley continue recording as he spoke into the camera. This is the 3rd time I've asked Mr. Blackwell to move his vehicle so we can reach his wife, who is in active labor. He's refused each time, stating that he doesn't want his car damaged. The video had been uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook simultaneously. The caption read, "Billionaire blocks ambulance for pregnant wife because he doesn't want to scratch his Bentley. 8-month pregnant woman forced to take detour during premature labor. This is America." Elena felt sick to her stomach, but not from pregnancy hormones. How many people have seen this? She whispered. Sarah checked her phone. Elena, it's been 3 hours since this was posted. It has 2.7 million views on TikTok alone. 2.7 million? It's trending on Twitter. Bentley baby and blocked ambulance are both in the top 10 nationally. Elena sank back into her hospital pillows. Oh, God. There's more. Sarah's voice was gentle but urgent. The local news stations have picked it up. Channel 7 wants to interview you. Elena's phone started buzzing. Text after text after text. Unknown numbers, news outlets, social media notifications she'd never signed up for. I have to turn this off. She fumbled for the power button, but Sarah caught her hand. Honey, before you do that, you need to know what people are saying. I don't want to know. Yes, you do. Trust me. Sarah scrolled through the comments on the TikTok video. This man is a monster. How is she married to this psychopath? Someone get this woman a divorce lawyer. The audacity of rich men never fails to amaze me. Elena listened in stunned silence. Elena, there are women sharing their own stories. Hundreds of them. Women whose partners have prioritized money and possessions over their safety. Sarah kept reading. My ex-husband wouldn't take me to the hospital when I had a miscarriage because his favorite TV show was on. My boyfriend made me walk to urgent care with a broken ankle because he didn't want to pay for parking. When I was in labor with our twins, my husband stopped for gas and bought lottery tickets while I was having contractions in the car. Stop, Elena whispered. I can't hear anymore. But Sarah wasn't finished. The video has been shared by celebrities, Elena. Oprah shared it. Ellen DeGeneres shared it. Women's rights organizations are using it as an example of financial abuse. To financial abuse? When someone uses money and possessions to control or harm their partner, which is exactly what Jonathan did. Elena's hospital room door opened, and Jonathan walked in carrying coffee and looking irritated. Elena, we have a problem. My phone has been ringing nonstop. Apparently some paramedic posted a video of tonight, and people are completely misunderstanding the situation. Sarah stood up slowly. Elena had forgotten that Sarah and Jonathan had never gotten along. Sarah had always said there was something off about him, but Elena had attributed it to jealousness or overprotectiveness. Now she wondered if Sarah had seen something she'd missed. Hi, Jonathan. Sarah's voice was ice cold. I was just showing Elena how 2.7 million people understand the situation perfectly. Jonathan's face went pale. 2.7 million? And climbing, Sarah said. You're famous, Jonathan. Congratulations. This is a disaster. Jonathan started pacing. My lawyers are already working on getting the video taken down. On what grounds? Sarah asked. Everything on that video actually happened. On grounds of harassment and defamation. That paramedic had no right to record me. Elena watched her husband pace back and forth, his mind clearly racing through damage control scenarios. Not once did he ask how she was feeling. Not once did he express concern for their baby. Jonathan, Elena said quietly, sit down. I can't sit down. Do you understand what this means for the company? For our reputation? Our reputation? Yes, our reputation. We're in this together, Elena. Sarah snorted. You weren't together when you blocked an ambulance. Jonathan whirled around. You know what, Sarah? This is exactly the kind of toxic negativity Elena doesn't need right now. Maybe you should leave. Maybe you should leave, Sarah shot back. Elena almost died because of your selfishness, and you're worried about your image. I'm worried about our future. Someone has to think practically here. Elena felt another contraction, but this one was different. Not physical, emotional. Everything inside her was contracting away from the man she'd married. Get out, she said quietly. What? Jonathan stopped pacing. Both of you, get out. I need to think. Sarah kissed Elena's forehead. I'll be right outside if you need me. Jonathan hesitated. Elena, we need to discuss how we're going to handle this. The only thing I need to handle right now is keeping our baby safe. Everything else can wait. After they left, Elena lay in the darkness, scrolling through the comments on the viral video. Sarah was right. Thousands of women were sharing their own stories of partners who'd shown their true priorities when it mattered most. But there were other comments too. Comments that made her stomach twist. She knew who she married. Gold diggers don't get to complain when their meal ticket shows his true colors. She's probably just mad because she thought she'd married money, and now she looks bad. Rich wives always play the victim when their husband's money can't solve everything. Elena turned off her phone and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the woman she'd been this morning. A woman who made excuses for her husband's controlling behavior. A woman who convinced herself that his need to manage every situation was just his way of protecting her. A woman who had somehow convinced herself that being kept like an expensive pet was the same thing as being loved. That woman felt like a stranger now. The truth was harsh and simple. Jonathan had shown her exactly who he was when the stakes were highest. When their baby's life was literally on the line, he'd chosen his car. Elena remembered other moments now. Other times when Jonathan's priorities had been crystal clear. When her mother had been in the hospital and Jonathan complained about the parking fees. When her best friend from college had visited and Jonathan spent the entire dinner talking about how much the restaurant cost. When she'd wanted to go back to work at the nonprofit and Jonathan had said it would look bad for his wife to be working for charity money. All those moments she'd rationalized. All those red flags she'd ignored. Elena placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palms. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I let him put his car before your life. But even as she said it, She realized she was making a promise. This would never happen again. Whatever it took, wherever it led, she was never again going to let someone else's priorities matter more than her child's safety. The video had shown the world who Jonathan really was. Now Elena had to decide who she was going to be. 37 million views, Jonathan. 37 million people know who you really are. Elena delivered the words with quiet precision as her husband stood frozen in the doorway of her hospital room. It was 8 in the morning, and she'd been awake all night watching the numbers climb. 37 million views, trending in 43 countries. The video had been picked up by every major news network in America and half the ones in Europe. Jonathan looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Elena, I've been up all night with the crisis management team. We have a plan. A plan for what? To fix this, to control the narrative. Elena adjusted herself in the hospital bed, feeling every muscle in her body ache from the stress of premature labor. What narrative needs controlling? The one where I look like a monster for protecting our property. You are a monster for protecting property over your family. Jonathan sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Blackwell Industries stock dropped 12% in overnight trading. 12%, Elena. How's the baby? What? I said, how's the baby? Your child, who almost died last night. How is your child this morning? Jonathan blinked slowly. The baby's fine. Dr. Hayes said everything looks good. You had to think about that answer. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. You literally paused to remember what the doctor told you about your own child's health. Jonathan's phone buzzed, and his eyes immediately went to the screen. Don't you dare answer that. Elena, this is important. More important than this conversation? This conversation isn't going to fix anything. My lawyers need me to... Your lawyers need you to what? Lie about what happened? Jonathan looked up from his phone, and Elena saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Calculation. Cold, precise calculation about how to manipulate the situation. We need to clarify what happened. The video makes it look worse than it was. How could it look worse than it was? You blocked an ambulance. I was in shock. I wasn't thinking clearly. Anyone would have reacted the same way in a crisis situation. Elena stared at him. Anyone would have blocked an ambulance to protect their car? Anyone would have been protective of their property in a confusing situation. Confusing? Jonathan, I was screaming that the baby was coming. What was confusing about that? Jonathan's phone buzzed again. This time he answered it without asking permission. What's the latest damage assessment? He said into the phone. Elena watched her husband discuss stock prices and media strategy while she lay in a hospital bed recovering from the worst night of her life. She could hear fragments of the conversation. Sympathetic interview, stress response, charitable donation. Make her the story, not me. Make her the story, not me. Elena felt something cold and sharp pierce through her chest. Jonathan was already planning to throw her under the bus to save his reputation. When he hung up, Elena was crying. Why are you crying? Everything's going to be fine. Everything is not going to be fine. Elena, you're being dramatic. This will blow over in a week. Will it? Will you blocking an ambulance while I was in labor blow over? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I lived it, Jonathan. I was there. Jonathan stood up and started pacing again. Elena was beginning to recognize this as his crisis mode. When things got difficult, he moved constantly, as if he could outrun the consequences of his actions. The lawyers think we should do a joint interview. Show a united front. You can explain that you never felt like I was putting the car before you. But you were putting the car before me. That's not how it's going to sound in the interview. Elena felt her heart rate monitor beep faster. You want me to lie. I want you to provide context. I want you to leave. Elena, I want you to leave right now. We need to discuss this. No, we don't. You've already decided what you're going to do. You're going to sacrifice my credibility to save your reputation. I'm trying to save our life together. Our life together? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jonathan, you almost killed our baby to avoid scratching your car. We don't have a life together anymore. Jonathan's face went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent the last 8 hours watching millions of people see exactly what I should have seen years ago. Which is what? That you don't love me. You love what I represent. You love having a wife who makes you look good at company parties and doesn't ask too many questions about where the money comes from. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me how I felt about anything? When was the last time you cared about my opinion on something that mattered to you? Jonathan opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. You can't think of a time, can you? Elena, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 5 years. Elena's phone started ringing. She could see it was Sarah, but before she could answer, Jonathan grabbed it. We're not taking calls from the media. That's my best friend. Your best friend who's been filling your head with poison since college. Give me my phone. Elena, you need to understand the seriousness of this situation. Every word you say from now on will be scrutinized. Every interview, every conversation, every social media post. Give me my phone or I'll call security. Jonathan handed her the phone reluctantly. Elena answered Sarah's call. Elena, honey, are you okay? I've been worried sick. I'm fine. What's happening out there? It's chaos. There are news trucks outside the hospital, protesters outside Blackwell Industries. Someone started a GoFundMe to help you leave Jonathan. Elena glanced at her husband, who was listening to every word. How much money? Elena, Jonathan warned. How much money, Sarah? $47,000 in 6 hours. Elena felt the room spin slightly. $47,000 from complete strangers who thought she deserved better than the man she'd married. Elena, hang up the phone. Jonathan's voice was sharp now, commanding. Why? Because this conversation is being recorded. By who? By everyone. Every phone call, every text message, everything is evidence now. Elena looked at her husband and realized she was finally seeing him without any filters. No excuses, no rationalizations, no benefit of the doubt. She was seeing a man who had just told her that he assumed every conversation was being recorded because he was already planning his legal defense. Jonathan, I want you to leave this room and not come back until you can have a conversation about our baby without mentioning lawyers, stock prices, or media strategy. Elena, get out. After he left, Elena sat in the silence of her hospital room and tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. 37 million people had watched her husband choose a car over her life. $47,000 had been donated by strangers who thought she deserved better. News trucks were camped outside the hospital where she was recovering from a traumatic premature labor, and her husband's first priority was protecting his reputation. Elena placed her hands on her belly and felt the baby move. Strong, healthy movements that reminded her what really mattered. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay. For the first time since the contraction started, Elena felt something that had nothing to do with fear or pain or confusion. She felt angry, really, truly, righteously angry. And anger, she was beginning to realize, was much more useful than heartbreak. We can fix this, Elena, but I need you to say it was a misunderstanding. Jonathan sat across from Elena in her hospital room with 3 people she'd never met before. A crisis management specialist, a media consultant, and a lawyer who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour just to breathe. Elena was sitting up in bed, feeling stronger than she had the night before. The baby's heartbeat was steady, her contractions had stopped, and Dr. Hayes was cautiously optimistic about avoiding premature delivery. Who are these people? Elena asked. This is Melissa Wang from Crane Crisis Management. This is David Rodriguez from Strategic Media Solutions. And this is Arthur Klein, the best defamation attorney in the state. Elena looked at the 3 strangers who were apparently there to manage her life. I don't remember asking for any of this. Melissa, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s, opened a leather portfolio. Mrs. Blackwell, we're here to help you navigate this situation with minimal damage to your family's reputation. My family's reputation? Your husband's company stock has dropped 21% since the video went viral. There are protesters outside Blackwell Industries calling for a boycott. The situation requires immediate intervention. Elena felt like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. What kind of intervention? David, the media consultant, leaned forward. We've scheduled a joint interview with Channel 7 for tomorrow morning. We'll position this as a misunderstood crisis situation where your husband was in shock and not thinking clearly. But he was thinking clearly. He called his mechanic. Arthur, the lawyer, made a note on his legal pad. Mrs. Blackwell, it's important that you understand the legal implications of this situation. Your husband could face charges for obstruction of emergency services. Maybe he should face charges. The room went very quiet. Jonathan's voice was strained. Elena, they're trying to help us. They're trying to help you. What are they doing for me? Melissa consulted her notes. We're going to position you as the supportive wife who understands that crisis situations can cause people to react in unexpected ways. What if I don't want to be positioned as anything? Elena, Jonathan said, we need to present a united front. Why? Because that's what married couples do. Elena looked around the room at the four people who were planning her public statements without asking what she actually wanted to say. Can I speak to my husband alone, please? The three consultants gathered their materials and filed out of the room. Elena waited until the door closed before speaking. Jonathan, what happened last night changed everything. I know you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm awake. For the first time in 5 years, I'm completely awake. Jonathan sat down on the edge of her bed. Elena, I know I made mistakes last night. I was stressed and I wasn't thinking clearly. But we can get through this together. Can we? Because it seems like your plan is to sacrifice my credibility to save your reputation. That's not what this is about, isn't it? You want me to go on television and lie about what happened. I want you to provide context about what happened. Elena studied her husband's face. She'd been married to him for 5 years, but she realized she'd never really looked at him when he was lying. Now she could see it clearly. The way his eyes shifted slightly to the left. The way his mouth got tighter. The way his hands moved when he was trying to sell a story. Jonathan, do you love me? Of course I love you. No, really, do you actually love me? Or do you love being married to me? What kind of question is that? An important one. Because a man who loves his wife doesn't let her almost die in an ambulance to protect his car. Elena, you didn't almost die. I could have. Our baby could have died. Those 8 minutes could have been the difference between life and death. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I panicked, okay? I've had that car for 3 years. It's special to me. My father gave it to me when we went public with the company. It represents everything I've worked for. What do I represent? What do you mean? If your car represents everything you've worked for, what do I represent? Jonathan looked genuinely confused. You're my wife. That's not an answer. Elena, I don't understand what you want me to say. And there it was. The truth she'd been avoiding for years. Jonathan didn't understand what she wanted him to say because he'd never thought about what she meant to him beyond her function as his wife. I want you to say that I matter more than anything else in your life. I want you to say that you would have moved 10 cars to save me and our baby. I want you to say that you're horrified by your own behavior. I am horrified. Are you? Because the first thing you did when you got to the hospital was complain about the paramedics. The first thing you did this morning was bring in crisis management specialists. You haven't once apologized for what happened. Jonathan blinked slowly. I'm sorry. For what? For the situation last night. That's not an apology. That's a press release. Elena's hospital room door opened, and a man in his 70s walked in. Elena recognized him immediately as David Blackwell, Jonathan's father. She'd only met him a handful of times, but he was unmistakable. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair, and the kind of presence that came from decades of commanding boardrooms. Dad, what are you doing here? David Blackwell looked around the hospital room, taking in his son, his daughter-in-law, and the obvious tension between them. I came to check on Elena and my grandchild, and to see what kind of mess my son has created. Dad, the lawyer said not to discuss. I don't care what the lawyer said. David's voice carried the authority of someone who had built an empire from nothing. I saw the video, Jonathan. The whole world saw the video. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably. It's not as bad as it looks. It's worse than it looks. David turned to Elena. How are you feeling, dear? Elena was surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. I'm okay. The baby's okay. Thank God for that. David sat down in the visitor's chair. Elena, I want you to know that what happened last night does not represent the values of our family. Dad, be quiet, Jonathan. David's tone was sharp. In my day, a man who endangered his pregnant wife would be horsewhipped. The fact that you did it for a car, he shook his head in disgust. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. It was the first time since the whole ordeal began that someone from Jonathan's family had acknowledged the severity of what had happened. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. I'm here to ask what you need. What can I do to make this right? Elena looked back and forth between father and son. David was everything Jonathan pretended to be. Dignified, thoughtful, genuinely concerned about other people. I don't know, Elena admitted. Everything is happening so fast. Take your time, but know that you have my support, whatever you decide to do. Jonathan's face had gone pale. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying that Elena is family, and family protects family, even when it's difficult. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. For 5 years, she'd felt like an outsider in the Blackwell family, like she was being tolerated rather than welcomed. But David's words carried a weight that Jonathan's apologies never had. I need some time to think, Elena said finally. Of course you do. David stood up. Jonathan, walk me out. Dad, I need to stay with Elena. Elena needs rest. Walk me out. After they left, Elena was alone for the first time since the crisis management team had arrived. She could hear Jonathan and his father talking in the hallway, their voices getting progressively louder. She's not going to do the interview, Jonathan. She has to do the interview. Without it, this whole thing spirals. Maybe it should spiral. Maybe you deserve to face the consequences of your actions. Dad, you don't understand the financial implications? I understand them perfectly. I also understand that there are some things more important than money. Like what? Like integrity. Like family. Like doing the right thing even when it costs you something. Elena closed her eyes and tried to imagine a different version of last night. A version where Jonathan immediately moved the car. A version where he held her hand in the ambulance instead of worrying about his image. A version where he spent the night at the hospital asking about her needs instead of planning damage control. But she couldn't imagine it because the man who would have done those things wasn't the man she'd married. She'd married someone who loved the idea of her more than he loved her. And no amount of crisis management could fix that. Mrs. Blackwell, the whole world wants to know. Can you forgive your husband? Elena sat across from Channel 7 anchor Rebecca Martinez in a room at Mercy General Hospital that had been converted into a makeshift television studio. Bright lights, multiple cameras, and a production crew of 8 people had transformed her recovery space into something that felt surreal and overwhelming. Jonathan sat beside her, his hand resting on her arm in what she was sure was a calculated gesture of unity. The crisis management team had coached them for 3 hours on messaging, body language, and how to redirect difficult questions. Elena had agreed to do the interview, but not for the reasons Jonathan thought. That's a complicated question, Elena said, looking directly into the camera instead of at the interviewer. She could feel Jonathan tense beside her. This wasn't the script they'd rehearsed. How so? Rebecca Martinez leaned forward with the instincts of someone who sensed a story unfolding. Because forgiveness implies that someone has acknowledged what they did wrong and asked for forgiveness. The room was completely silent, except for the hum of camera equipment. Jonathan's media consultant, David Rodriguez, was standing behind the cameras making subtle hand gestures that Elena ignored completely. And your husband hasn't done that? Rebecca asked. Elena turned to look at Jonathan for the first time since the interview began. Have you? Jonathan's face was flushed. Elena, I've apologized multiple times. For what, specifically? For the misunderstanding last night. What misunderstanding? Elena could see the panic in Jonathan's eyes. This was not going according to the plan his team had created. For the confusion about the car situation. Jonathan, there was no confusion. You refused to let paramedics move your car while I was in labor because you were worried about scratches. Rebecca Martinez's eyes lit up. This was better than anything she could have hoped for. Mr. Blackwell, is that accurate? Jonathan's lawyer had advised him never to admit fault on camera. I was in a state of shock. I wasn't thinking clearly about priorities. What were you thinking about? Elena asked quietly. Elena, no, really. What was going through your mind when the paramedic asked you to move your car? Jonathan looked desperately at his crisis management team, but they couldn't help him now. I was thinking about protecting our property. Over protecting your family? It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. Elena's voice was steady but firm. You had a choice between your car and your child's life. You chose your car. The hospital room was so quiet that Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the monitor beside her bed. Rebecca Martinez recovered her composure first. Mrs. Blackwell, this must be incredibly difficult for you. It is, but not for the reasons people might think. What do you mean? Elena looked directly into the main camera again. She thought about the millions of women who had shared their own stories online. Women who had been dismissed, minimized, and gaslit by partners who prioritized everything else over their well-being. I almost lost my baby because my husband couldn't bear the thought of scratching his car. But what's really difficult is realizing that this wasn't an anomaly. This was my husband showing me exactly who he is. Elena, stop! Jonathan's voice was sharp. Why should I stop? Because it's embarrassing for you. Because you're destroying our life together. No, Jonathan, you destroyed our life together when you blocked an ambulance. Elena turned back to Rebecca Martinez. For 5 years, I've been making excuses for behavior that I should have recognized as controlling and selfish. Last night, I couldn't make excuses anymore. What kind of controlling behavior? Rebecca asked. Jonathan started to speak, but Elena continued. Financial control, social isolation, emotional manipulation, all the classic patterns that I somehow convinced myself were just his way of taking care of me. Elena, that's not fair, Jonathan said. Isn't it? When was the last time I made a decision about my own life without asking your permission? Jonathan opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. When was the last time I spent money without justifying it to you? When was the last time I saw my friends without you complaining about them? When was the last time I worked at a job that made me happy instead of one that looked good for your image? Rebecca Martinez was taking notes frantically. This was turning into the interview of her career. Elena, you're being emotional, Jonathan said. Yes, I am emotional. My baby almost died because you were more concerned about your car than our child's life. I think emotion is the appropriate response. Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. The power of telling the truth without worrying about consequences. The power of speaking for herself instead of through someone else's script. Mrs. Blackwell, what happens now? Rebecca asked. Elena looked at Jonathan one more time. She could see the man she'd thought she'd married somewhere in his eyes, but she could also see the man who had revealed himself the night before. Now I figure out how to raise my child with dignity and integrity, with or without my husband. Jonathan's face went completely white. Elena, you can't mean that. I mean every word of it. We can work through this. We can get counseling. We can... Jonathan, you blocked an ambulance while I was in labor. Because you were worried about your car, I made a mistake. No, you revealed your character, and I can't unknow what I know now. Elena looked into the camera one final time. I want to say something to all the women who have been sharing their stories online. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not asking for too much when you expect your partner to prioritize your life over their possessions. She paused, feeling the weight of 37 million people who had watched her husband's true nature revealed. You deserve better. We all deserve better. And it's never too late to start demanding it. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but Elena knew that those words would be the clip played on every news station in America. When the cameras stopped rolling, Jonathan turned to her with a look she'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. Elena, you just destroyed everything we've built together. No, Jonathan, you destroyed everything we built together. I just refuse to help you cover it up. Elena's phone was buzzing with notifications before the production crew had even finished packing their equipment. Messages from strangers thanking her for her honesty. Messages from women sharing their own stories of partners who had shown their true priorities when it mattered most. Messages from lawyers offering to help her for free. And one message from David Blackwell. I'm proud of you. Elena looked at Jonathan, who was frantically texting with his crisis management team, and realized that she felt lighter than she had in years. She'd told the truth about her marriage on national television, and instead of feeling ashamed, she felt free. Mrs. Blackwell, obstruction of emergency services is a felony in this state. District Attorney Catherine Foster sat across from Elena in a conference room at the prosecutor's office 3 days after the interview aired. Elena was out of the hospital but still feeling weak from the ordeal of premature labor that had thankfully stabilized. Elena's new lawyer, Rebecca Stone, sat beside her taking notes. Rebecca specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had called Elena personally after watching the interview. The video evidence is overwhelming, DA Foster continued. We have clear documentation of Mr. Blackwell's refusal to allow emergency services to access a patient in active labor. Elena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. What does that mean exactly? It means your husband could face up to 5 years in prison and significant financial penalties. Rebecca Stone looked up from her notes. Catherine, we appreciate you keeping Elena informed, but she's not the one pressing charges here. No, but her testimony will be crucial to the case. Elena felt overwhelmed. A week ago, her biggest concern had been choosing paint colors for the nursery. Now she was sitting in a prosecutor's office discussing her husband's potential prison sentence. Do you need me to testify? Elena asked. We'd like you to. Your first-hand account of what happened would be powerful testimony. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. How's it going? Call me when you're done. The meeting continued for another hour, covering evidence collection, timeline for charges, and what Elena could expect during the legal process. When it was over, Rebecca walked Elena to her car. How are you holding up? Rebecca asked. I honestly don't know. Everything is happening so fast. That's normal. High-profile divorces always feel like drinking from a fire hose. Elena stopped walking. Divorce? Elena, surely you're not planning to stay married to Jonathan after everything that's happened. Elena realized she hadn't actually thought that far ahead. She'd been focused on telling the truth, on protecting her baby, on reclaiming her voice. But the practical implications of her television appearance were only beginning to sink in. I don't know what I'm planning. Rebecca's expression softened. Elena, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've represented women in situations very similar to yours. The financial control, the isolation, the way he prioritized his image over your safety. These are classic patterns of emotional and financial abuse. But he never hit me. Abuse doesn't have to be physical to be devastating. Jonathan has spent 5 years conditioning you to prioritize his needs over your own. Last night was just the most extreme example. Elena got into her car and drove home in a daze. Home to the house that Jonathan had chosen, decorated with furniture that Jonathan had selected, in a neighborhood that Jonathan had deemed appropriate for his image. As she pulled into the driveway of their 5-bedroom colonial, Elena realized she couldn't remember making a single major decision about her living situation in 5 years of marriage. Jonathan's BMW was in the garage, which meant he was home. Elena wasn't sure she was ready to face him, but she didn't have anywhere else to go. She found him in his home office, on a conference call with what sounded like his entire legal team. The prosecution doesn't have a case, he was saying. Emergency services protocols are unclear about vehicle removal in breakdown situations. Elena stood in the doorway, listening to her husband argue that he hadn't committed a crime by blocking an ambulance while she was in labor. When he noticed her, he quickly ended the call. Elena, we need to talk. I know. My lawyers think we should file a countersuit against the paramedic for recording without consent. Elena stared at him. Are you serious? The recording was made without my permission during a medical emergency. There are privacy laws. Jonathan, stop. We can also go after the hospital for releasing information to the media. Stop! Jonathan looked startled. Elena realized she'd never raised her voice at him before. In 5 years of marriage, she'd never once yelled at her husband. You want to sue the paramedic who saved our baby's life? I want to protect our family from further damage. What family, Jonathan? What family are you protecting? Jonathan's phone rang. Without thinking, he started to answer it. Elena walked over and took the phone out of his hand. Elena, what are you doing? I'm asking you to have one conversation with me where you don't answer your phone, check your email, or talk to your lawyers. This is important. More important than this conversation? Elena, there are legal implications to everything we discuss now. Then let's discuss something that doesn't have legal implications. Let's talk about our baby. Jonathan looked genuinely confused. What about the baby? Do you want to be a father? Of course I want to be a father. Why? What do you mean, why? I mean, what kind of father do you want to be? What do you want to teach our child? What kind of example do you want to set? Jonathan was quiet for a long time. Elena could see him thinking, really thinking, for the first time since the whole ordeal began. I want to be a good father. What does that mean to you? I want to provide for our child. I want to make sure they have every advantage in life. What about showing them how to treat people? What about teaching them that some things matter more than money? Elena, I know you think I'm materialistic, but everything I do is for our family. Is it? Because it seems like everything you do is for your image. Jonathan's phone started buzzing with notifications. Elena could see him fighting the urge to check it. My image affects our family's future. Does it? Because right now your image is destroying our family's present. Elena walked to the window overlooking their backyard. The landscaping was perfect, expensive, and completely soulless, like everything else in their life together. Jonathan, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about your answer. Okay, if our baby had died last night because of those 8 minutes, could you have lived with yourself? The question hung in the air between them. Elena, that's not a fair question. The baby didn't die. That's not an answer. It's a hypothetical situation. No, it's not. For 8 minutes last night, it was a very real possibility. And during those 8 minutes, you were more worried about your car than our child's life. Jonathan sat down heavily in his desk chair. I panicked. You called your mechanic. People who are panicking don't make organized phone calls to automotive repair services. Elena, what do you want me to say? I want you to say that you're horrified by your own behavior. I want you to say that you would make a different choice if you could do it over again. I want you to say that you understand why I can't trust you anymore. Jonathan looked at her for a long time before speaking. I can't say those things. Why not? Because admitting fault could be used against me in the criminal case. Elena felt something break inside her chest. Even now, even after everything, Jonathan's first priority was protecting himself legally. I'm going to stay at Sarah's tonight, Elena said quietly. Elena, running away isn't going to solve anything. I'm not running away. I'm taking space to think about what kind of life I want for our child. This is our home. This is your house. I've never felt at home here. Elena went upstairs to pack a bag, moving slowly through rooms that felt like museum exhibits of someone else's life. As she folded clothes that Jonathan had approved of into a suitcase that Jonathan had bought, Elena realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd made a choice about her own life without considering his opinion first. That was going to change, starting tonight. There's something else you need to know about that day, Elena. Marcus Bradley, the paramedic who had recorded the viral video, sat across from Elena in Rebecca Stone's law office. It had been a week since Elena moved out of the house she'd shared with Jonathan, and she was staying in Sarah's guest room while figuring out her next steps. What do you mean? Elena asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Elena a video she'd never seen before. It was time-stamped 43 minutes before the ambulance incident. I have to tell you, this was difficult for me to watch. On the screen, Elena could see Jonathan in his office at Blackwell Industries. The video was taken from across the street, clearly shot through his office window with a telephoto lens. Someone had sent it to Marcus anonymously after the original video went viral. Where did this come from? We're not sure. Someone who works in the building across from Blackwell Industries, probably. They sent it to every news station in the city, but most won't air it because of how it was obtained. Rebecca leaned forward. Marcus, what exactly are we looking at? Watch the timestamp. This is 43 minutes before Elena went into labor. Elena watched her husband sitting at his desk, talking on the phone. She could see him checking his watch repeatedly, looking agitated. Can you hear what he's saying? The person who shot this enhanced the audio. Elena, I want you to know that you don't have to watch this if you don't want to. I need to see it. Marcus pressed play. Jonathan's voice came through clearly. She's been having contractions all day. Yes, I know it's early. The doctor said it could be false labor. Elena felt her blood run cold. She hadn't told Jonathan about the early contractions. She'd been having them since noon, but had been trying to manage them herself, not wanting to worry him. How did he know I was having contractions? Marcus and Rebecca exchanged glances. Keep watching, Marcus said gently. Jonathan continued his phone conversation. I know. The Singapore deal is crucial. How long do you think the signing will take? Elena realized Jonathan was talking to someone about a business deal while she was in labor at home. No, I can't reschedule. Chen's only in town tonight. If we don't close this deal now, Hartman Industries will get the contract. Elena remembered that day clearly now. She'd been having mild contractions since lunch, but had convinced herself they were Braxton Hicks contractions. False labor. Jonathan had left for work early that morning and hadn't come home until almost dinner time. She'd called him once around 3 o'clock to ask if he could come home early. He'd said he was in meetings all afternoon. On the video, Jonathan was clearly agitated. How much longer can she wait? I mean, first babies usually take forever, right? Elena felt sick to her stomach. Elena, are you okay? Rebecca asked. He knew. He knew I was in labor, and he stayed at work to close a business deal. It gets worse, Marcus said quietly. Jonathan's voice continued. Worst case scenario, she can call an ambulance. It's not like we can't afford it. Elena stared at the screen in shock. He planned for me to take an ambulance. That's why he took the scenic route home, Rebecca said, understanding immediately. He was hoping the labor would progress slowly enough for him to finish his meeting. But it didn't. The contractions got stronger, and he had to leave the office. So he was already angry about missing his meeting when the car broke down. Marcus nodded, which explains why he was so adamant about protecting the car. He'd already sacrificed his business deal. He wasn't going to sacrifice his property too. Elena felt like she might be sick. How long was this meeting? Marcus checked the timestamp on another video file. According to this, he left the office 12 minutes before your car broke down on the bridge. 12 minutes? He could have been home hours earlier. Rebecca was taking notes furiously. Elena, this completely changes the legal picture. This shows premeditation. Jonathan knowingly delayed coming home while you were in labor. And then he blocked the ambulance because he was angry about missing his meeting? It's starting to look that way. Elena stood up and walked to the window of Rebecca's office. The city looked different from the 23rd floor. Smaller, more manageable. Elena, I know this is a lot to process, Marcus said, but there's something else. Elena turned around. What else could there possibly be? Marcus showed her another video file. This is from the traffic camera on Riverside Bridge. It shows the 30 minutes before we arrived. Elena didn't want to watch, but she knew she had to see everything. The traffic camera footage showed Jonathan's Bentley driving onto the bridge at normal speed. Then it showed the car slowing down, then stopping. Then Jonathan getting out to look under the hood. But the car wasn't smoking. There was no visible sign of mechanical failure. Marcus, I don't understand what I'm looking at. Elena, the car didn't break down. What do you mean? According to this footage, Jonathan stopped the car himself. Then he popped the hood and did something to the engine. Rebecca leaned forward. Are you saying he disabled his own car? I'm saying that's what it looks like. We'd need a mechanical expert to examine the vehicle to be sure. But the footage suggests that Jonathan may have caused the breakdown deliberately. Elena felt the room spin slightly. Why would he do that? Think about it, Rebecca said. He's already missed his business meeting because of your labor. He's angry and resentful. Maybe he wanted to create a situation where you'd be forced to take an ambulance, which would prove his point that the labor wasn't his responsibility. But then why block the ambulance? Because when it actually happened, he realized how it would look. A billionaire whose wife takes an ambulance to the hospital? It would seem like he didn't care enough to drive her himself. Elena sank back into her chair. So he disabled the car to avoid dealing with my labor, then blocked the ambulance to avoid looking like a bad husband. That's our theory, Marcus said. But Elena, this is just speculation based on video evidence. We can't prove intent. You don't need to prove intent, Elena said quietly. I know my husband. This is exactly the kind of thing he would do. Rebecca closed her legal pad. Elena, this evidence changes everything. If Jonathan deliberately disabled the car, he's not just guilty of obstruction of emergency services, he's guilty of reckless endangerment with premeditation. Elena thought about the woman she'd been a week ago, a woman who would have found reasons to excuse this behavior, a woman who would have convinced herself there must be some explanation that made sense. That woman felt like a stranger now. What happens next? Elena asked. Next, we take this evidence to the district attorney, and we make sure Jonathan faces the full consequences of his actions. Elena looked out the window again. Somewhere in the city below, Jonathan was probably meeting with his lawyers, planning his defense, managing his crisis. But Elena wasn't in crisis anymore. For the first time in years, she knew exactly where she stood and exactly what she needed to do. Jonathan had gambled with their baby's life to avoid missing a business meeting, and Elena was done making excuses for him. The jury finds the defendant guilty of reckless endangerment and obstruction of emergency services. Elena sat in the front row of the courtroom as Judge Helen Rivera read the verdict. 3 months had passed since the night that changed everything. 3 months of legal proceedings, media attention, and the slow process of rebuilding her life. Jonathan stood perfectly still as the verdict was read, his expensive suit impeccable as always, his face a mask of controlled composure. But Elena could see the slight tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders seemed to deflate with each guilty count. The defendant will be sentenced in 30 days, Judge Rivera continued. Bail is revoked. The defendant will be remanded into custody immediately. Elena watched as her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, was handcuffed and led away. She felt no satisfaction in seeing him arrested, but she felt something that had been missing from her life for years: justice. The trial had been a media sensation, but Elena had testified with calm precision about the events of that night. She'd told the truth about Jonathan's behavior, about the pattern of control in their marriage, and about the additional evidence that Marcus Bradley had uncovered. The prosecution had brought in automotive experts who confirmed that Jonathan had deliberately disabled his own car. Phone records showed the calls he'd received warning him about Elena's labor. Video evidence proved he'd had multiple opportunities to prevent the entire situation. The defense had tried to paint Jonathan as a man in crisis, someone who'd made poor decisions under stress. But the evidence was overwhelming. Elena's testimony had been the most powerful moment of the trial. Mrs. Blackwell, the prosecutor had asked, in your opinion, did your husband prioritize his property over your life? In my opinion, Elena had answered, my husband prioritized his image over our child's life. The car was just a symbol of that. After the verdict, Elena met with Rebecca Stone in the courthouse lobby. How are you feeling? Rebecca asked. Relieved and sad and scared about what comes next. What comes next is whatever you decide comes next. Elena looked around the courthouse lobby. There were news cameras everywhere, reporters trying to get statements from anyone connected to the case. But Elena had already said everything she needed to say. The divorce had been finalized the week before. Elena had received a substantial settlement, enough to buy her own house and support herself and the baby comfortably. More importantly, she'd received full custody of their daughter. Hope Elena Martinez had been born 6 weeks ago, healthy and perfect, and completely unaware that her birth had caused a media sensation. Elena had chosen to return to her maiden name for both herself and her daughter. Elena? Rebecca touched her arm gently. David Blackwell is here. He'd like to speak with you. Elena turned to see Jonathan's father approaching through the crowd. At 72, David Blackwell still commanded attention wherever he went. But today his face showed the strain of watching his son convicted of felony charges. Elena, my dear, how are you holding up? I'm okay, David. How are you? I'm ashamed, he said simply. I raised a son who nearly killed his own child to protect a car. I don't know how that happened, but I take responsibility for it. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. David, you can't blame yourself for Jonathan's choices. Perhaps not, but I can make sure those choices have consequences. He handed Elena an envelope. This is from the Blackwell Family Foundation. It's a donation to the domestic violence shelter where you've been volunteering. Elena opened the envelope. The check was for $500,000. David, I can't accept this. It's not for you. It's for the women you're helping. Women who need to know that there are consequences when powerful men abuse their power. Elena hugged David Blackwell, this man who had shown her more genuine concern in 3 months than his son had shown her in 5 years of marriage. There's something else, David said. The board has voted to remove Jonathan from Blackwell Industries permanently. His shares will be placed in trust for Hope. What does that mean? It means your daughter will never have to worry about money, And it means Jonathan will never again have the kind of power that allowed him to think he was above basic human decency. Elena left the courthouse that day feeling something she hadn't felt in years: hope for the future. The next morning, Elena sat in the nursery of her new apartment, feeding hope and watching the sunrise through windows that she had chosen herself. The apartment was small compared to the house she'd shared with Jonathan, but it felt like home in a way that mansion never had. Her phone rang. It was Sarah. "How are you doing, Mama?" "I'm good, really good." "Have you seen the news this morning?" "No, I try not to watch the news anymore." "What's happening?" "The Elena Martinez Foundation just received its largest donation ever. Apparently, the video of Jonathan blocking the ambulance has raised over $2 million for domestic violence prevention." Elena looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. $2 million? From women all over the world who want to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. After Elena hung up, she walked to the window holding hope. The city spread out below them, full of possibilities and challenges and opportunities to help other women find their voices. "You know what, baby girl?" Elena whispered to her daughter. "I think we're going to be just fine." 3 months ago, Elena had been a woman who made excuses for inexcusable behavior, a woman who prioritized peace over truth, comfort over integrity. Today, she was a woman who had told her story honestly and inspired millions of other women to examine their own relationships. Jonathan had shown her who he really was on the worst night of her life, and in response, Elena had shown the world who she really was. The woman who had been afraid to speak up was gone. In her place was a mother who would never again allow anyone to treat her with anything less than respect. And that woman was going to change the world. "Elena Martinez, or do you prefer Blackwell?" the reporter asked with a smile. Elena adjusted hope in her arms and looked directly into the camera. It had been 6 months since the night that changed everything, and this was her first major interview since the trial ended. "It's Elena Martinez," she said firmly. "I went back to my maiden name when Hope was born. We're both Martinez women now." The reporter, Janet Chen from Good Morning America, nodded approvingly. They were sitting in Elena's new living room, a cozy space filled with natural light and furniture that Elena had chosen herself. It was a far cry from the sterile perfection of the Blackwell mansion. "You've been through an incredible transformation over the past 6 months. Tell us about your work with the Elena Martinez Foundation." Elena shifted hope to her shoulder and smiled. "The foundation started accidentally. After the video went viral, women began donating money and sharing their own stories of partners who had shown their true priorities during crisis moments." "What kinds of stories?" "Partners who wouldn't take time off work when their wives had miscarriages. Husbands who refused to go to the hospital because they didn't want to pay for parking. Men who prioritized golf games over their children's medical emergencies. The stories were heartbreaking but also incredibly powerful." Janet leaned forward. "And now you're helping these women?" "We're helping women recognize the signs of financial and emotional abuse. We provide legal resources, counseling services, and emergency financial assistance for women who need to leave controlling relationships." Elena paused as Hope gurgled softly against her shoulder. Motherhood had changed her in ways she was still discovering. The fierce protectiveness she felt for her daughter had awakened something in her that she'd never known existed. "Elena, many people have called you a hero for speaking out the way you did. How does that feel?" "I'm not a hero. I'm just a woman who finally stopped making excuses for inexcusable behavior." Elena looked directly into the camera. "But if my story has helped other women find their voices, then something good came from the worst night of my life. What would you say to women who are watching this and recognizing themselves in your story?" Elena had been asked this question dozens of times over the past months, but her answer had evolved as she'd worked with more and more women through the foundation. "I would say that you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not asking for too much when you expect to be treated with basic respect and consideration." She paused, thinking about the hundreds of women she'd spoken with through the foundation's helpline. "I would also say that leaving isn't easy, and it's not always possible right away. But recognizing the patterns is the first step. And knowing that other women have been through this and survived, that's powerful." Janet consulted her notes. "Your ex-husband was sentenced to 18 months in prison and community service. How do you feel about that?" Elena had prepared for this question, but still found it difficult to answer. I feel sad for Jonathan. I think he's a man who confused possessions with identity, control with love. I hope he gets the help he needs to understand the difference. Do you have any regrets about how everything unfolded? My only regret is that it took me so long to see clearly. I wasted 5 years of my life making excuses for someone who saw me as a possession, rather than a partner. Hope started to fuss, and Elena instinctively began the gentle swaying motion that had become second nature. What's next for Elena Martinez? Elena looked down at her daughter and felt the familiar surge of fierce love and determination. Next, Hope and I are going to build a life based on authenticity and integrity. We're going to travel. I'm going to show her the world and teach her that she never has to make herself smaller to make someone else comfortable. And romantically, do you think you'll trust someone again? Elena laughed, the first completely genuine laugh she'd had during a media interview. Someday, maybe, but I'm in no rush. I'm learning how to be happy on my own terms first. Hope and I are a complete family exactly as we are. After the interview crew left, Elena sat in her quiet apartment with Hope sleeping in her arms. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that she'd chosen, in a space that she'd decorated, in a life that she'd built from scratch. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Watching you on TV. So proud of who you've become. Elena scrolled through dozens of similar messages from friends, colleagues from the foundation, and strangers who had been inspired by her story. But the message that meant the most was from David Blackwell. Watching your interview, Jonathan lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Hope is lucky to have you as her mother. Elena walked to the window overlooking the small garden behind her building. She'd planted vegetables there in the spring, tomatoes, herbs, flowers that she'd chosen simply because they made her happy. 6 months ago, she'd been a woman who asked permission to buy groceries. Today, she was a woman who had testified in federal court, started a foundation, and raised over $3 million to help other women escape controlling relationships. The transformation still amazed her sometimes. Her phone rang. It was the foundation's crisis helpline forwarding a call. Elena Martinez Foundation, this is Elena. Hi, I saw you on TV this morning. The voice was young, scared. I think I might need help. Elena sat down in her favorite chair, the one she'd bought because it was comfortable rather than expensive. I'm here, tell me what's happening. Tarm. For the next hour, Elena listened to a 24-year-old woman describe a relationship that sounded eerily familiar. Financial control, social isolation, a partner who claimed everything he did was for her own good. He says I'm too emotional, the young woman said. He says I don't understand how the real world works. Those are his words, not the truth, Elena said gently. In the real world, partners support each other. They don't tear each other down. But what if he's right? What if I really can't take care of myself? Elena looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her crib. This beautiful, perfect child who existed because Elena had found the strength to leave a toxic situation. 6 months ago, I thought the same thing. I thought I needed my husband to make decisions for me, to manage my life, to protect me from my own poor judgment. What changed? I realized that the person I needed protection from was him. Elena spent another 30 minutes talking the young woman through her options, connecting her with local resources and reminding her that she had more strength than she knew. After she hung up, Elena made herself dinner, a simple meal that she'd chosen because she wanted it, not because someone else expected it. As she ate, she thought about the interview question that had stayed with her. What's next for Elena Martinez? The truth was, she didn't know exactly what was next. For the first time in her adult life, she was making decisions day by day, following her instincts rather than someone else's plan. Maybe she'd go back to school. Maybe she'd expand the foundation internationally. Maybe she'd write a book. Maybe she'd do all of those things, or none of them. The difference was that now, whatever she decided would be her choice. Elena finished dinner and went to check on Hope. Her daughter was awake, looking up at her with the alert, curious expression that reminded Elena so much of her own mother. You know what, baby girl? Elena whispered, picking up her daughter. I used to think that losing your father's love was the worst thing that could happen to us. Hope made a soft cooing sound, as if she were listening. But I was wrong. The worst thing that could have happened was if I'd kept making excuses for someone who didn't know how to love us properly. Elena walked to the window holding hope against her chest. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. You're going to grow up knowing that you never have to choose between your dignity and your security. You're going to know that real love doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller. Elena thought about the viral video that had started it all. 37 million people had watched her husband choose his car over her life. But those same 37 million people had also watched Elena choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval. And if someone ever treats you the way your father treated me, you're going to know exactly what to do. Hope reached up and grabbed Elena's finger with her tiny fist. You're going to remember that you're Elena Martinez's daughter, and Elena Martinez's daughter doesn't accept anything less than respect. Outside, the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Somewhere out there, women were recognizing themselves in Elena's story. Somewhere out there, women were finding the courage to speak their truth. And somewhere out there, future daughters would grow up in a world where Elena Martinez had proven that it was never too late to choose yourself. Elena Martinez, the woman who had once been too afraid to choose her own groceries, had become the woman who helped other women choose freedom. The transformation was complete. But the story was just beginning. "Come on, Hope," Elena whispered to her daughter. "Let's go see what tomorrow brings." For the first time in her life, Elena couldn't wait to find out. If you're ready for a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, control, and finding your strength when it matters most, you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you believe every woman deserves respect. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe because we're diving deep into stories that matter. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. Let's begin with the night that changed everything.